Hi, folks. Today I thought I'd talk a little bit about running economy. Both, what is running economy and what are some things that you can do to improve it? So, running economy, think of efficiency, think of fuel economy, fuel efficiency. It's really the same thing. If I've got a Hummer and I've got my car as a Camry and they both say have a 14-gallon tank, well, I'll guarantee that I get better fuel economy, better efficiency with that Camry than I would with the Hummer. Same type of thing. You might say, well, my VO2 max is this and so is my buddy. And it's nice to have a good VO2 max, but it's also a question of, well, how efficient are you at using that oxygen? So improving your running economy is going to allow you to run faster at the same effort than you were before, which is, of course, the goal of training. And there's lots of things that you can do. I'm only going to be covering a few of those. But first, one of the big things is your running form. Running form is going to make a big difference in how efficient you are, what your running economy is. And you can see at the bottom I noted unconscious. And what I mean by that is a lot of people think, well, I'm going to really concentrate on my running form today. That's really not going to work because I would challenge you to concentrate on doing anything for much longer than 20 or 30 seconds before your mind drifts into something else. So if you're trying to make sure you're always running tall or getting the shoulders back, etc., you just can't think about that for a long period of time. That's not to say it's bad to do that, but what you want to create is a situation where your body is unconsciously doing those things because most of your running is going to be unconscious. So let's look at those. So tip number one, run faster. Now, by run faster, I'm not talking about getting rid of easy runs by any stretch of the imagination, but you want to insert into your training, if it's not there already, some faster running, usually once or twice a week, in the form of strides. You can do strides on a hill or you can do strides on flat. You might also refer to those other things. Hill sprints are slightly different, but really the same thing. Some people call it hill bounding. It's another word for that. I'm going to put a link to a video I have on strides up here, so if you want to learn more about strides, you can. I won't go in detail in those, but having those in most of your weeks, that faster running is going to help you. So how in the world does that help you? Well, let's talk about fast running versus slow running. You might have heard that a long run shouldn't be much more than about 30% of your total weekly mileage, which is really hard for a lot of people to do during marathon training because if you want to have, say, a 20-miler, then that means you better be doing 60-plus miles a week. And some people say, I don't have the time to do that. So here's the balance, and here's why that's important. Slower running is generally not very good for running technique and form. We do not run as efficiently when we run slower. Unfortunately, slow running is a staple of distance events, and distance events are the 800 meter all the way up through ultra marathons and everything else. So you have to have those, but the idea of limiting the long run is you don't want too much slow running because it's going to counteract with some good running form. So let me give you some examples from myself. So I think most people would know I use a stride power meter. One of the things that power meter does is attempts to determine how much of my power, my energy, is being used for something other than driving me straight forward. So we all have something called vertical oscillation because you're not dead even on the ground. You're doing like essentially a series of little hops. So how much you're going up and down, you also end up with some lateral movement side to side. Again, how much of that? You're going to have some. That the answer can never be zero, but you want to try and minimize that to the extent you can because it's energy spent for doing something other than driving you forward. So on my recent easy run, my form power was 28%. In other words, 28% of all my energy was spent doing something side to side or up and down, not moving me forward. Conversely, I recently did some intervals at right around a 5K pace, a little bit slower than 5K pace actually. My form power was 23%. So you can see I was more efficient running that because I was running faster. We just tend to automatically run better when we run faster. And then finally, I was doing some intervals at sub-mile pace, and my form power then was 19%. So it's very clear to see that for almost everybody, the faster that you run, the more efficient you become. Of course, you can't do that fast running all the time. You're going to get injured all the time. You won't build your aerobic base, etc. But again, the strides and hill sprints and things like that. I'll give you one key to strides and hill sprints. And as I said, you can go to the video I have on those if you want more information. They should always be smooth, strong, controlled. So if you're doing those strides, which are typically going to be 20 seconds, maybe up to 30 seconds, and they feel forced, if you feel like you're straining, that's too much because that's not what your goal is in a race. Not to say it wouldn't be hard, but you shouldn't feel straining. You shouldn't get to the end of it and feel like you have to throw up. but they should be smooth, strong, controlled, and running faster is going to help you improve your running form. Next tip, strength work at least twice a week. I know a lot of people that do strength work once a week. Frankly, in my opinion, not a personal trainer, in my opinion, strength work once a week isn't going to do very much for you. It's just not enough stress on the body and the muscles. You want to try and do it at least a couple of times a week. So why does this matter? Well, I'll use a marathon example, but obviously it applies to other distances as well. Go watch somebody, your average runner, in the final marathon miles, and you'll see that they're bent over and they're slouching. Their form is usually terrible, and it's not that their lungs and heart have given out, it's that their body is given out. In order to get that nice tall posture when you run and get your shoulders back and still run relaxed, there's a degree of strength that you have to have in your core and in your body in general, the legs and everything. So I've never met anybody that wouldn't do well to hit the gym a couple times a week, even if it meant running a little bit less, because improving your strength is going to help you run with better form, which is going to make you more efficient, which is going to make you faster, etc. And the last tip, flexibility. And I'll also say flexibility to the extent that you need it for your running range of motion. So what do I mean by that? I'll use hamstrings as an example. You hardly ever will find a runner that doesn't say, I got to stretch my hamstrings. My hamstrings are tight. I got to do my hamstrings. I'm here to tell you, my hamstrings are fairly tight or short, as the case may be. If I want to try and stand up and touch my toes, I'm maybe 5 inches from my toes. I've got a big gap. On the other hand, not to say that it wouldn't be a good thing to be able to touch my toes, that wouldn't help my running efficiency at all. Why? Because I've kind of tested my hamstrings. I've got another video. I can only link one, but if you do a search for hamstrings on the channel, you'll find another video about hamstrings. I have plenty of range of motion in my hamstrings to accomplish what I need to accomplish in running. Meaning I can stretch them more, that's fine, but they won't make me run any faster. I need to focus on the ones that are holding me back from having that good form and running well. There's a lot of different things to stretch. I'm going to touch on, in my experience, a couple things that a lot of runners don't pay enough attention to, and probably most people need to do some stretching here. One is your hip flexors. We are largely a sitting society, and that's terrible with the hip flexors. And the reason the hip flexors are important is a lot of your speed should come from your stride behind you. It's the ability to get that leg back behind you and drive forward. And if your hip flexors are tight, you're going to limit your range of motion going backwards. So make sure that you've got good flexibility in your hip flexors. And then your shoulders and upper back, which most people won't think about. We tend to think about from the waist down with running. But if you think about it, the same type of a thing, your arm should be driving back pretty far when you are running. It doesn't come forward very much, it goes back. But if you've got tightness in the upper back and the shoulders, or if you've got weakness in the shoulders, that's a strength thing, then you're not going to get the arm drive that you need. And as I said, there's all kinds of other muscles you want to make sure, but the key thing is making sure you have enough range of motion for the running activity. So to kind of summarize, strides 1 to 2 times. Most weeks, you probably might not do them in taper. You might not do them coming out of a marathon. Most weeks, 1 to 2 times with strides. Strength work a couple times a week. And stretching, you'll notice I didn't put a frequency down. That's because stretching is very individual. The fact is, there are some people that don't really need to stretch. They're just naturally limber and they've got a little flexibility, so there's no point in them doing stretching. Other people like me might do well to stretch 2 or 3 times a day because I'm generally pretty tight. Just all depends upon you and what's going to work best for you.